You're listening to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis, a podcast designed to explore the personal mission of everyday leaders. Hear from men and women who are making a difference in their corner of the world and discover what keeps them on mission.
Welcome to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis. I'm Jonathan Sheely. Our guest today is Chesley. Jared is the facilities manager at Maranatha Baptist University. Jared and his wife Jody have 4 children ranging in age from 9 to 15. His favorite meal is a ribeye steak, garlic mashed potatoes, and asparagus. He enjoys hiking, scuba diving, and spending time with his kids. He likes sports but does not have a favorite team. Too many have let him down. Jared, welcome to the podcast.
We count that. That's a Cubs fan. Right?
You should know. I felt bad putting that because I was like,
we'll claim you.
Yeah, Cubs fans are going to give me a hard time about that.
Of course. So, Jody, Josiah, Jalen, Judah, Jacob.
Yes.
Jared.
Yep.
Okay, so you guys were just destined for Jays.
Yeah, once my wife and I got married, we both had Jays, and so then we named our first kid, and it was Josiah was the name we stuck with. It wasn't really on purpose.
Do you have any backups?
Well,
in case?
Once we got to our second kid, then we couldn't change.
No, you're locked in.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah. Fred, you can't. What happened,
Dad? My wife joked that they would always be accused of being adopted if we ever changed, and so we were like, we can't now.
Well, okay. Yeah. It's cute, I don't know whether to give you credit for that or Jody, but all the J's from the Chesley family. So, yeah, you have good favorites here. Ribeye steak, I totally get with. Garlic mashed potatoes, I can go for that. Asparagus, though, no. What? How does that come in? Is it like a garnish? Is that what you meant?
You have to.
They're easier to scrape off the plate without leaving much residue.
My meal is very different than what you're thinking.
Oh.
My meal is the cow that we raised in our backyard and butchered locally, and the ribeye that is grass-fed and succulent and amazing, and you don't even need to use a knife to cut it. And the potatoes are from our garden that our kids helped us grow, and they're made from the garlic that came from our garden. And our asparagus is fresh cut from outside with a little bit of grilling on the grill next to the steak before you bring it in.
What time do you want me to be over?
Yeah, I'm like, let's go.
Yeah. It's a lot of hard work, but when you do that hard work, you can enjoy it so much more. So
well, that maybe puts it a little bit in perspective. All right, I'll go for that. Have you really been scuba diving?
Yeah, I started scuba diving.
You have to get certified for that, right? Like I couldn't just slap a tank on and go in the water.
Well, you could, but I won't guarantee the result. When I was 12 years old, it was just interested me. I loved science and exploring, and so I started scuba diving and I had a paper route, and I earned money, and I got all my own equipment, and I got certification. I actually was a master diver by the time I was 15, and had over 100 dives, and it was something that I enjoyed doing with my dad before he passed away. So,
wow, that is an interesting hobby. I've not known a whole lot of people that young that have gotten into that. Where did you grow up to where you would be going scuba diving?
Northern Indiana. Northern Indiana.
Like the coasts of Indiana? I mean, what?
Yeah, that's right.
Tropical reef. There is an Indiana beach. I've been there.
That's true.
Yeah, there's more than corn in Indiana.
A lot of lakes. And then if you know of Indiana, Indiana has Indiana limestone. The quarries, the old quarries would fill with water, so we'd go there.
And some of those are deep.
They are. That's where I did my deep water certification for my master. We went down 95 feet in a quarry. Whoa. It was dark and cold, and we had to watch out for the paddlefish because they were bigger than a human, and they were in these quarries, and it was really weird.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Jonathan's going to hit you with a deep question now that we've gotten all the important things off the table.
We want to know what your personal mission is.
I was thinking about that earlier because I knew this was an On Mission podcast and I had to have a mission. And I hadn't really put it.
You don't have to create one just for the podcast. We invited you because you obviously have one. All right. But how you articulate it or think of it.
Right. That's what I was trying. I was trying to, how do I articulate it? And for me, it was kind of a process in my life of what God did in my life that helped me realize that unless I'm living my life for Him, then it's not going to be productive. I experienced some different things in my life with my dad dying at a young age at 15, and I had to overcome that and figure out how to deal with that. I struggled with that for a while, but the Lord...
Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I do. I have one brother.
So older or younger?
He's older, a year and a half older, yeah.
So he's 16, you're 15,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden your dad is gone.
Yeah, he died of cancer, and it was one of those things that I was very upset for God for a while. I hadn't been saved, but it was hard for a 15-year-old to come with grips with
Well,
that.
he must have been pretty young to pass from cancer.
51. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, he struggled. It was actually a blessing because when I was 5 years old, 6 years old, he had cancer. They removed a kidney. He was in remission. And then he got it. It came back, and he lost a 3-year battle with cancer. But he had prayed that the Lord would allow him to see his kids grow up, and the Lord gave him 10 more years. And so it was a blessing. But as a 15-year-old, I still couldn't. It was a struggle. And the Lord allowed situations in my life. Part of it was visiting my uncle, who was a missionary in Africa, to help me really understand life. And so I started, I was like, okay, I got this, Lord. You work in my life for a purpose. I went to Northland for missions. But through some circumstances, being in the military and some challenging things in my life, I kind of got to a point where I was doing my own thing. And I thought, okay, I'm going to not be a bad person, but I'm going to kind of live how I want. I wanted to be a businessman. I wanted to, grow and possibly purchase this business. And I worked really hard, and it was really successful, and everything was going well. And then the Lord was just kind of like, things in my life personally weren't working out, and future goals weren't working out. And I was just really frustrated. Like, man, God, what are you doing in my life? And I will never forget that night. I was going out to put wood in my wood boiler. I heated with wood, and I slipped and fell on the ice flat on my back. I don't know if it was divine intervention or not. It doesn't really matter. The point was, I really was struggling and wrestling with God for a couple of years about what I was doing. And that's when I finally realized that I was trying to be a good person. I grew up in a Christian home, went to a Christian college, but I was just trying to be a good person. And through the difficulties in my life, and God, the Holy Spirit bringing scripture verses from Awana and from college to my mind, I realized that I was living for myself. And I rededicated my life to the Lord January of 2019. And I was like, maybe this business that I've been working for 10 years to try and develop and buy into and just isn't where God wants me. And I felt guilty because twice when I went to move, my wife was like, are we going to take your commentaries and your books from college with us? And I was like, I can't throw them away because, Lord, I promised you I'd do this. And then that's when I found the job to come here.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. How old were you when you fell flat on your back and had the sort of moment of, I don't know, crisis or decision or whatever you want to call it?
I was 32 years old.
32 years old. Yep. You've already got a family.
Yep.
You're not a bad guy. You've had a lot of life lessons and things at that point. You've lived a good life, but it was almost like a real turning point for you. I've heard you talk about that moment, and you obviously have the date, recalled right from the top of your head. Isn't it interesting how a moment that was routine, everyday task, all of a sudden becomes that profound in the Lord's hands?
Yeah.
But like you said, I don't know what made that so special, but it was obviously a major milestone for you that God sort of had to get your attention. Maybe that's the way to say it. Yeah,
it was, some of the sleepless nights, struggling with thoughts and things, and it was kind of that jarring moment. You'd been working through this. I'd kind of been, there's times I didn't feel like going to church because the messages would be convicting. I was avoiding some of my friends that I knew would speak to me truthfully. And I was trying to avoid the guilt of, I wasn't being a bad person. I was trying to take care of my wife. I was, working hard. I wasn't doing anything really wrong, but I knew that I wasn't doing what God had intended for me. I wasn't on mission. It was my wake-up call saying, hey, what's going on here? So then that's really what the Lord, when I decided what I do needs to be for the Lord, and I need to teach my children that, and I need to tell the other people that I interact with. When we have people over to our house, I try and encourage them and say, if you're not doing what the Lord wants you to, you're going to struggle. I struggled,
Well, can I ask you about that a little bit? Because the description you give of, avoiding the sermons and wrestling with conviction and sleepless nights, that's the kind of thing we think of as somebody who's struggling from some besetting sin, like, this alcoholic or this guy who's, drug addict or got some deep iniquity in his life that he's hiding. But you're describing that and just in the sense of, I knew there was more that God had for me. And although everything I was doing was good, it wasn't, there had to be something else.
Yeah.
There had to be something more. How did you discover that?
Well,
what did you have to give up, at that moment of dedication that made the difference?
Well, I don't normally share this. I'll be real with you. I mean, part of it was my military experience. When I was in the military, preparing to go overseas, whether you're in an area that sees a lot of action or not, you're preparing for this mission and you're trained to go do this. And to do it effectively, you have to be willing to give up everything else. Yeah. Like, you can't go out on a convoy and be prepared to do your job unless you're willing to do it 100%. And you go and you're in the military for a while, you go on a combat tour, you come back, regardless if it was a lot of action or not. And I don't know, when I got home, I just had this sense of, man, I did this thing, I did this, I deserve some me time. I need to focus on myself. I need to, my wife had talked to me about maybe meeting with somebody and talking about some of my struggles and issues. I mean, the military does a great job of reprogramming your brain. When they train you, trust me. Like, so to, even from my wife saying, man, you're a different man than I married. Like, wow. when I got home, and it was a struggle. And so that kind of set off, some more thoughts of, man, God, I went and did this, why can't I do this? Or why can't I have this? Or I want a better house, or I want a better job, or I want more money. Like, the company was successful, but not successful enough. And so it was really introspection is what was causing the problem.
So maybe we need to back up biographically a little bit, because you're referring to a pretty momentous turning or establishing, point in your life. You served in the Army.
Yes.
And your unit was deployed to Iraq.
Correct.
And you were an infantry officer at
yes.
that point, and had command of troops, and found yourself in the middle of the beginning of the drawdown
mm-hmm.
In the Iraq War. In 2009, your unit deployed, and I don't know if they ever tried to blow up your bus, or if you ever had to participate, like you said, in those kinds of combat operations. But a lot of the guys that come back, whether they saw that or not, dealt with and can probably still deal with the heightened awareness,
mm-hmm.
All the other factors that go along with not being at home. I mean, when you're in a war zone, you're in a war zone. And
mm-hmm.
and so I'm sure that's got to be part of it too. And plus the intensity of that versus the different pace of things at home and the different types of challenges and problems that you have at home. So surely some of that plays into your mindset, when you talk about the restlessness of the adjustment and transition,
yeah.
even and returning home.
I mean, when you go over, it's 100% of the time. Even when you're not on duty, you're still on duty. And so being trained to do something and feeling like you're doing it well and having a sense of accomplishment, there's something in it. And so when you come home and you have to transition to being at home and going to work and coming home and switching these tasks back and forth and trying to figure out what you're doing, you can kind of feel lost, not effective, purposeless. Yeah. I mean, I remember there's times I stayed late at work on my own time just trying to get better at my job so I could feel that same type of accomplishment, but I was away from home and, and things like that. So it was I even got to the point where, regrettably, when I was sitting in church, I was like trying to watch the doors to see where the bad guys were going to come in and what I would do. I mean, sure. I was driving down the highway one time and I saw a billboard and I thought there was a sniper on the billboard, but it was an advertisement for Fiddler on the Roof. And this was this guy up there with a fiddle, and I pulled off the side of the road. And what really, I got to a point where I was really having a hard time being effective at home and really coming to grips with living a life that was purposeful and meaningful, until I realized through this experience that a lot of my problems were that I was focused on myself. Oh. And I had to get to a point where, whether you believe in concealed carry or not, I had to to not conceal carry. I had to 100% trust the Lord with my own personal safety, because for so long I had determined in my brain that was up to me. Like, you have to defend yourself. You have to do this. You have to do that. You have to succeed the mission. You have to do this. You have to do this. You have to do this. And so whenever I encountered an obstacle, I tried harder. Whenever I couldn't get away, I tried to try and find another way around. And it wasn't to the point where I finally was like, you know what, Lord? If I go and I'm attacked by a robber, my life is in your hands. If I am at church and somebody comes in, my life is in your hands. Now, obviously, I still had a tactical plan in my mind of what I would do, but
and the skills to do it.
Right. But it got to that point where I had been so introspective that the problem with my marriage, my wife and I had to, have some talks with each other, because I wasn't the man she married. I had changed. I had to, how do I fix this? I'm children.
Not the man that my wife married either. And she's not the woman that I married, because marriage itself changes you.
That is a very true statement.
Life changes you no matter whether you were deployed or not. But what happens in a deployment is you're not together during those changes, and you notice them more drastically. Like when you see your nephew, after the year, and you're like, whoa, you grew 6 inches, and he doesn't even think he grew at all, But there are those, and I'm sure that there's even more profound changes that take place.
I'll have to give a shout out to my wife, because
she's amazing.
I left her when she was pregnant and went to basic training, and came back right before she had the baby. And then I left when he was 4 months old and didn't get home until his second birthday. So our whole first child, I was basically gone. And then the next 3 children, I was National Guard doing a full-time job and finishing my degree. And my wife was home by herself a lot. We kind of saw each other in passing for a few years. And, the graciousness she showed me, and the kindness and the love of Christ was one of the things that helped confront me when I was living for myself. Like, when that's one of those factors that the Lord used, was her gracious response, and helped me realize, man, you're being a little selfish.
A lot of marriages don't last during those deployments or following them, because
I understand why.
Those same stresses, but that doesn't have to be the result.
Right.
And God's goodness is there, and a gracious wife that can handle that. What a strong partner that she has been to help establish that. And maybe we should have her on the podcast in the next follow-up episode to see the other side of the story. Yeah. Because she was living through a war zone on her own side of things.
Yeah, it is, and that's sometimes the family members of military service members, they don't get enough credit, and they have to do a lot, especially spouses on the back end. And then dealing with the military, it's like, well, you're done, thanks, welcome home. They give you 3 days of counseling, and they send you home to your family, and then it's your family's problem to deal with you and help you figure out what's going on, and that's why, like you're saying, there's a lot of extra stress. That's a common theme. I'm just thankful that the Lord, I have to give him 100% credit that he allowed my wife and I to work through that very difficult time.
You probably have a lot of insights to be able to relate empathetically to guys that are, maybe find themselves in that same situation, younger guys that are going down that same road that you had to kind of forge the path on your own and feel your way through.
I want to be clear that everyone's different. I mean, there are some people who have traumatic brain injury, from IEDs, and that is a medical condition, the way your brain doesn't function the same afterwards. There's some guys that have seen and done things that maybe I didn't do, that they have to deal with a different way. So I can't say my story is the answer to everyone out there, because there's millions of service members that have gone through a similar thing, but for me, that was how I dealt with it. Now, there's still times where, you can ask some of the guys we work with. There's a couple guys who've been in the military here on campus, and we'll joke about things that that once you've been in the military, you just view the world differently, and it doesn't change. But for the most part, a lot of the things the Lord has allowed to be impactful in my life, to relate to people, for me to, we were just joking the other day, sorry to bring it back to facilities, but we're there in a dorm room at 11 o'clock at night that's flooded, and then we're extracting the carpet, and it's late, and we already had a long day. And then I looked at the guy next to me who was also in the Army, and I said, well, we've had worse. And he shook his head and said, yep, we just keep extracting. I mean, the benefits are, I mean, it's something that the Lord has allowed those experiences, even though it was difficult and it was hard and I made mistakes and I have consequences of those mistakes I made. I had bad habits that I had to get rid of, but the Lord is able to work in our lives in spite of our mistakes. And that's the biggest thing I try and share when I share this testimony, because it's embarrassing to tell people I messed up. I went to Bible college and then I kind of did my own thing, and I was not a good example as I should have been. And I may have struggled with some personal issues. But man, God is amazing. And when I actually interviewed to come here to Maranatha, I didn't feel like God could use me, because there were some things I struggled with, in the military, some bad habits I picked up. And, I was like, that's it. God can't use me. And the devil had this in my brain that is like, you can't be used. And I met with my pastor, David Harper.
That is not from God. That is a thought that comes from the other side of that ledger.
And I met with Pastor Harper at Waukerusa Bible Baptist. And he said, Jared, God forgives. God forgives unconditionally. Look at the Old Testament and the example that he gave of people who failed but love God, and that's the important thing. And so that really helped me to say, you know what, Lord, I want to serve you. I want to be effective, and that's a choice that I have to make. And you can forgive and overcome. Yeah,
and you look back and you see that God actually used those things to prepare you for something that you didn't really know was even on the horizon. And I think about all the millions of dollars that the United States government poured into training you to be the leader that you are today, and we're getting the benefit from that. And I've actually seen that so many times, in not just the conversations that we have on a regular basis on a work side of things, but just to see you working with your team. And I think, well, that was probably the U.S. Army that taught him how to do that. I mean, you command troops in combat, and now we're combating a little different kind of an enemy now. But that's actually part of what God was doing that you can recognize now looking backwards.
Yeah, and that is, it's a lot of it is, for a while I felt like, man, my life, I'm running in a circle, I'm wandering in the desert. That's kind of what I've described it as, what's going on. But then now where I'm at, so of the last 3 years, I've looked back and I've seen the Lord has used my experience in food service, my experience in the military, my experience on well drilling, my experience working selling vehicle parts to be able to help me in my job now to take care of vehicles, to take care of kitchen equipment, to take care of grounds, to take care of custodial, all these things. The Lord has cutting down trees. The Lord has put all of these things together in my life, and it's reassuring when you get to that point where you can see God working in your life.
Yeah. So you had this kind of moment, 2019. What did you end up doing about it? I mean, it's one thing for us to have like a late night, thought that we think is fairly profound, but then you kind of have to make a decision and actually act on it. Is that the time frame that the Lord started opening doors for you to come here?
Yeah, it was. It was very scary to say, Lord, I'll do whatever you want. And I told my wife, and she looked at me and was just like, what does that mean? I mean, like, we had this whole life planned. We had, where our kids or their friends, where they were going to go to high school, college. We had all of our life planned out. And then I just said, Lord, I'll do whatever you want. And it was extremely scary. We met with my pastor and we talked about it. And ironically, it was my wife who helped us on the next step. She remembered that her brother had come to Maranatha, and they were on the way home from a family event. And out of the blue, she just got on Maranatha's website to see if there was a job opening, and she saw the one for a maintenance guy. My husband could do that. And she asked me, I was like, no, I don't want to go do that. Like, I'm done with college, and I'm not going to do that. But through talking with her, talking with my pastor, praying about it, we had a little farm. We sold the farm and we moved up here, and it's been really neat. And ironically, I said I'd never go back to college. I'm working on my master's degree in leadership, and that's been a blessing too. So,
yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. You're in the Master of Organizational Leadership program here at Maranatha. You got into it. Are you the oldest guy in the program?
I don't know. The few classes I've been in, I was, probably the oldest guy.
I actually doubt you are even close to being the oldest guy in the program. You're probably at more of a typical age.
Okay.
for that particular program. We certainly have some college age students that just continue on through. And in fact, you can actually get the MOL as a dual degree as an undergrad at Maranatha and finish in 4 years. So it's pretty awesome. But, well, I guess it's 4 plus the summer. You have to do your project in the summer. So you're about a class and a half away or something close to finishing that. So give a little promo, I guess. Or, if you hate the program, I guess you could say that, although I know you don't.
No, it's been a really enjoyable experience. When you're in college the first time around as an 18, 20-year-old, everything's new and you're trying to figure stuff out and you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
But
there's no context.
Yeah, it's been interesting going back and doing a degree in leadership because I, was a supervisor in a kitchen, my military experience. I have a lot of different, the superintendent at the well drilling company. I had a lot of experience and I was trying things out and trying to figure it out. But then I was able to put some, I was able to really understand what I was doing and what was working. Because when I became a military officer, I was like, man, I've had some bad officers. I can do a better job than that. I'm going to take care of my troops and I'm going to do the right thing. And I was successful and I made all my promotions early. And, there was a couple times I was kind of under the gun, but then somebody stepped up and said, hey, he's the only one doing the right thing. Why are you getting mad at him? And so I learned that if I do the right thing and I take care of my people, then that's what my job is. So then it was kind of interesting once I got into the MOL program and study this servant leadership that's out in the leadership world that, they're trying to, man, how can we get a good leadership? And the secular world's trying to put together a formula for getting the perfect leader. And part of it is the servant leadership. Well, I saw that in taking care of my troops. I see that in Christ. When you go back to the Bible, in the Bible, Christ is the perfect leader. Mm-hmm. And so in my class, there was a couple of discussion boards where I explored that and looked through it. And then you realize that the reason some of these secular companies that are trying to emulate it, and they can't because it's not organic. Number one, they're trying to be a good leader instead of trying to do the right thing and it making them a good leader. And so, yeah, there are some that have done that, but I think that's because we have a little bit of God's image in us, and with our Judeo-Christian values.
There's a natural law principle at work where they're discovering truth through scientific principles, even in the business world, and they're analyzing what works, and it works because God designed the world that way, and He created us as human beings, and we respond to certain motivations, and we respond to emotions and conditions. So those things can be discovered, but if the motivation behind servant leadership isn't love for God, God's love reflected through us, then it just becomes very manipulative. Yeah. And I've read all the books out there about from the secular standpoint on servant leadership, and seeing it in action in the secular side, it just kind of turns into, how do I need to act in order to get people to do what I want them to do? And that's just a manipulation. If they're, like you said, I think organic, and I think maybe you can explain a little bit more what you mean by organic, but I think what you mean is that the motivations come from wanting to truly serve, not from a particular result you're trying to get from the service.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, like for me, I can think of one example where we're out on the range and, our guys were trying to pick up ammo in the long grass, and it was a long weekend, and it was wet
what
and raining.
What do you mean out on the range?
So we, in the middle, so we were preparing. It was a training. We were at a Camp Atterbury in Indiana, and we had been out doing what's called a live fire, where you're out and shooting and moving. So you're walking through the grass and shooting at live targets with live rounds. And so it takes a
And by live targets, you don't mean live people.
Sorry. I mean targets that are popping up and going down.
Okay, yes.
They are targets that are moving. It's not a stationary target.
Everybody calm down.
Sorry. We're shooting at targets on this live fire, and so you're walking through grass and through the woods, and you're shooting from different positions and moving. So instead of, if you go to the range, and you sit in a stall and you have a target that goes down and you're firing, and when you're done, you pick up all your ammo on a gun range. Yeah. But if you can imagine, you have almost a half a kilometer that you have to move and fire at various targets along the way. You're spreading your brass out everywhere, in log grass, tall grass, and at the end you have to turn it all in.
Oh my goodness.
So we have everybody out there in the rain, in the dark, with headlamps, picking through the grass, trying to pick it up. And at a certain point, my guys were tired. They were cold. They were going to get sick. When we got home, we had to get on the bus, drive back to Gary, Indiana. They had to get in their cars and then drive home.
So this was like one of your weekend things.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so it was going to be dangerous for them to keep doing this, because then how are they going to stay awake and get home? So I said to the leadership, I was like, I think we've gotten to the point where we can get a memo signed by the higher up saying you've got 90%. This is acceptable loss. Nobody took this ammo home. It's just out there. We can't get to it. And I got a lot of flack for it, but I told my guys, get on the bus. There's nothing more we can do. And I tried to do the right thing, not to progress my career, but I really cared for my guys. And later, it was another officer that came back and told the battalion commander, hey, you should really sign off on that, because he was actually the only one stayed with his guys and did it. And they were trying to do the right thing. And yeah, we can just have this signed off and it can be fine. Plus, they're the farthest drive home to get their guys home. So it was one of those things that, I saw a lot of other times in the military where the guys were trying to take care of their soldiers so they'd get good reviews and advance their career. But I wasn't planning on being in long term. I didn't care about my career. I honestly cared about doing the right thing for my guys. And so that's the type of thing that I'm talking about, is when that's organic.
Yeah. Well, sometimes there is a tension between following the processes and established rules and policy versus the right thing to do, which, normally we think follow the rules is the right thing to do, but you have to exercise some critical thinking in life. And critical thinking is a structured way of balancing priorities. And servant leadership says the priority is the people.
Right.
And I've seen that over and over in what you've written, how you've operated, is that, listen, we've got to prioritize the people. I appreciate so much your motivations as a facilities manager. We talk about things within the facilities world, but it always comes back to the students and the staff and the people that we're caring for. And the buildings are here to accomplish the mission in the lives of the people.
Yeah.
And that's always what it really comes back to, right?
Yeah, it is. And, that's one of those things where, we're all human, right? But bad management usually comes down to selfishness. So even good manager, there's days I'm like, man, I don't want to deal with this. But it's that love for the people where you make the choice to say, no, I'm going to deal with this. This is hard. I have to have a hard conversation. I have to make a difficult decision. And you choose to do it because you care. And if you don't do it, it's going to cause, more difficulty. And that's one of those things that, that's why there's no silver bullet with leadership, because even if you have good leadership qualities, you have the natural talent, you have the training, you have the opportunity, we're still humans. And so we still have good days and bad days. We still have days where we want to do the right thing and not. And that's why, in the MOL class, the leadership, going back and looking at Christ-centered leadership, that's why it's so important, because he has to be the one to keep bringing us back to that right point of, okay, I'm doing this because this is how he did it, and otherwise, there's no way we can do it on our own. You guys at this table know, being leaders, there's some days where you just don't want to come in and do it. Why do you? And it's because you care about the people that you're leading, and you want to do a good job for the Lord. Well,
you're alluding to it, but I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. I know you'll do well with this little mental exercise. But the mission of Maranatha is to develop leaders for the local church in the world to the praise of his glory. You oversee the facilities management division of the organization, which has a bunch of employees and a variety of different applications, everything from grounds, vehicles, plant management. You have capital improvement projects, custodial, all those things come under your command, if we were going to look at the structure that way, right?
Yeah.
Responsibility. How does that division plug into or help us to accomplish the institutional mission? Can you articulate that?
Yeah. It's some days it can feel like a stretch because it feels like all we're doing is, fixing leaking toilets and cutting grass and things like that in themselves don't feel like we are contributing to the mission. But when you come down to it, I've done school in person. I've done school online. I've done military training. I've had a lot of different training scenarios. And my time on campus in a Christian college was so valuable and important to me in establishing relationships and personal discipline and being a part of a group of people who care about serving the Lord, that I truly believe in. We have to have a place where students can come and get a good Christ-centered education, challenge one another, and be challenged by people who love the Lord. So having dorms that are comfortable for students to enjoy their time, having classrooms where learning can take place, having offices where stuff can be, classes can be prepared, is important, because without that, then you don't have that opportunity.
Right.
Now, I've done my portion online. I finished my degree online. So, I understand. And that was a period of my time I had to. I was National Guard. I was full-time job. I had kids, and I finished my degree online. It was necessary. But for those of us who've been truly impacted by your college experience, that those days stick with you the rest of your life, it was from that environment that you were at. And if it's not comfortable, you're not going to enjoy it. And so that's where all of our guys, I can honestly tell you, each one of our guys have on their own been like, hey, what about if we do this? It'll make this better. Or, hey, what about if we do this? It will help the students be more comfortable. They've really seen that too. And they are here for that purpose, that if we don't help make a facility or a place that encourages those opportunities to take place, then it's not going to exist. Even if we're not the ones making those opportunities, we're creating a place where it can happen.
Well, you also have direct interaction with a bunch of students. So how does that also help you relate to the institutional mission?
Yeah, we have a lot of good opportunities with students. We have students that work with maintenance and custodial and capital improvements and grounds. And, one of the things about becoming a servant leader or a leader, a Christ-centered leader, is you realize it's about the people. And so that's something we've talked about as supervisors is, hey, when you have your students, take some time and talk to them. See what's going on in their life. See what they're struggling with. Challenge them. There's times that we have to push them hard. Hey, we got to get this done. We need you to, I know that you have homework. You need to be able to make sure you tell us if you have a test. We need you to be here. We do. We try and push them to do what they're supposed to do, but we also try and encourage them. And I think it's been really neat. A lot of our guys have gotten to have some really good relationships with some of those students to encourage them, but also help encourage them to work hard. That's one of those things.
Which is in short supply in society right now.
Yeah.
People who actually want to work hard and understand the value of diligence and consistency and quality in the work product that they put out. And your staff, which includes those students that work with you, consistently get the job done. And they have in you all examples of people who are dedicated to accomplishing the mission in its own smaller view of that department or that task, and in the larger view of the institution itself. As you said, some days that takes a different, mode than others, and there's only so many days a year that you can wear those cool pants and run a chainsaw, which I know is your favorite day of the week. I never see him with a bigger smile on his face than when he's out there with the chaps on and getting in a bucket truck and cutting down some trees.
That's my stress relief.
We are running out of trees, so if you could slow down just a little bit on that, and there's the one tree that I will not let you touch.
That's true.
Right in front of Old Main. That one's been there. It's been all in all the pictures.
Yeah. We have pictures of it in 1919, I think. So
we don't know how long it's been there, but it's a long time. So that's what makes me nervous, because trees only live so long.
Yeah.
I appreciate so much the example that you have lived for the students. And there's so many other life experiences that we could delve into if time would allow, and maybe we'll be able to come back and sit down again in a future season and get part 2, get your wife in here and hear the other side of the story. I want to hear about someday I want to hear about the trip to Africa.
Oh, man.
And, you didn't come home with any weird exotic diseases or anything, did you?
I did.
You did? Oh, okay. Well, oops.
Whoa, spill the tea. Not right now.
All right, teaser for next time. All right.
Just real quick, my uncle was an amazing man. He was a Wycliffe Bible translator, 35 years serving the Lord. It was it was actually impactful for me coming here. That was one of the decisions that helped me commit to serving the Lord with my life, was watching his ministry and his attitude and his desire to please the Lord. And he did it such an amazing way.
Well, we really appreciate, I know from a staff perspective, all that your team does to keep the other staff offices functional. Students are the most important thing on campus, but we got to do our jobs too. And even in the room that we're in now, your staff was instrumental in putting this stuff together.
Thank you. And thank you for taking your time out. I'm sure you got 14 work orders that came in the meantime, but this has been a valuable conversation. I know it'll be a great encouragement to everybody that hears it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. On Mission is a production of Maranatha Baptist University. Subscribe to On Mission on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to leave a review, as this will help other growing leaders find these conversations. For information about our guests, previous episodes, and general information about On Mission or MBU, go to mbu.edu/podcast. Join us again next week as we examine what keeps leaders on mission.